Hey guys, in this video I will show you overview of BMW sensors which were used through the years and discuss the options you have when you swap newer engine to E21, E30 or E36. So all of these sensors you can see here are NTC thermistors. NTC stands for negative temperature coefficient. That basically means when you heat them up, their resistance will decrease, and I can demonstrate how it works with the E30 gauge, which I have here, and this potentiometer, which substitutes the sensor. And basically when you decrease its resistance, then the temperature rises up, and you can see it on the gauge as well. So let's talk about each sensor. I have 10 sensors here. I measured them at room temperature and at 90 degrees of Celsius. I tried to measure them as precise as I could, but of course there will be some tolerance, and even in the manufacturing process they have some tolerances as well. For example, for the VDO gauges, which are these three, I could find the tolerance values in the datasheet, and this one is like plus minus 1 degrees of Celsius when you recalculate, and these two are like plus minus 3 degrees of Celsius. Yeah, and there is also some tolerance from my measurement, of course. But yeah, let's talk about each of the sensor. So this one is a video sensor which follows curve 9. I will put the link to the datasheet to the description as well. This one actually goes inside of the tolerance of this sensor, which follows curve 1 from the datasheet. Yeah. So these ones are pretty similar. This one has a benefit that it has this type of connector, so it looks really like OEM sensor. Okay, so this is first, second, third one is I bought it like cheap one from Facet because I'm not really planning on using this one, but this one was used in E21s and early E30s for the gauge temperature. And this one is the so-called brown plug for the gauge temperature for E30. I bought this one like a Hella, but as you can see that it's pretty similar as this Facet or whatever it's pronounced there. So I'm suspecting that Hella is rebranding, or maybe somebody swapped it in the shop I bought it from this box. Yeah, because Hella normally has this, I don't know if you can see, yeah, but this type here. Okay, so these are pretty much for the gauge temperatures for E30 and E21. Then this group, this one is for the DME for E30, so-called blue plug. This one is the E36 temperature sensor. You can notice it has 4 pins. That's because 2 of them goes to the DME and 2 of them goes for the gauge. Then this one is temperature sensor from E46 and E90s. And this one was actually used for both water temperature and oil temperature. And this one is actually from E30. I bought this one because I thought it will be the same as this one, because it has the same thread. Both of them are M14, but this one has 2 pins, so I thought one of them will be ground, which is of course the cause or the reason. But yeah, this one actually has similar values as these 3, which are all for the DME. So I'm thinking this one was used for the DME for E30 diesel engines. Okay, and then this one is for oil temperature. This from VDO. I will use it just as a reference in my measurements, and I will use it for my VDO oil temperature gauge in my E30. And this one is a dummy sensor. Yeah, of course, this is not the real sensor, but this one, number 10, will represent the E36 sensor for the gauge, because I don't have E36, so I didn't buy it. But basically, before this sensor came into existence, early E36s actually used this one for the DME and this one for the gauge. So actually they then decide to combine these two into the single one, which has 4 pins, and 2 of them are for DME and 2 of them for the gauge. Okay, so that was each of the sensors. So you can see that I split it somehow into the groups. So these ones represent the E30 and E21 gauge. All of them can be used for the gauge, and all of this represents the DME sensors. Yeah, of course, this one is special because only 2 of the pins are for the DME. And these 3 has M12 thread, and this one has actually M14. Yeah, so I can skip this one, we don't need it anymore. And this one actually has M14 as well. And now I can get to the options for the swaps. So when you have a M50 or M52 engine, of course this came by the factory in E36, but when you are swapping them to the E30 or E21, it's pretty simple, because in the head there are already 2 threads, because as I said previously, these 2 sensors were used in the E36s, one with M12, one with M14 thread. And in M50 you can still find them. In M52 you can already find this one. And next to this one is actually a plug for the M15, so you just unscrew that one, and you can use just the brown plug for the E30 gauge, and that's it for the M52 and M52 swaps. Then you can have M54. Let's talk about that one. M54 from E46 uses this type of sensors, and it is the same thread, same values as this one. So when you are swapping M54 to E36, you just replace this sensor with this one, use 2 pins for the DMT, 2 for the gauge, and that's it. However, if you want to swap the M54 into E30, you can of course leave this one for the DME, but then you have a problem for the gauge. And M54 does not have this spare plug as the M50 and M52. So what you can do is just to put the sensor to the upper hose, for example, put the plastic part. I think in E39 maybe there was used something like that. You can tap it to the thread you need, and you can actually use this sensor when you have the correct thread, because this one has a isolated ground, so you will just use a connector with 2 pins, and that's it. Because of course when you put this one to the hose, yeah, there is no ground here, yeah, so you would need to put some washer with a connector below it or something like that, or weld the ground to this one, yeah, so that's also an option. And the same is pretty much for the E90 engines, yeah, like M54, because this uses this sensor as well, yeah. So for the E36 you just swap this sensor, and for the E30 and E21 you just need to fit somewhere these kind of sensors. One more thing regarding the swaps: if you are swapping a non-BMW engine to the E21 or E30, you can pretty much use this sensor from VDO, because this one comes with any thread you need and any connector type you need. If it's this screwing one or this type or this type, all of them. Only this one with any thread doesn't come with the 2 pins here with the isolated ground. Only this one comes with it, and this one is only in M14, yeah, nothing else. And when you are swapping some non-BMW engine to the E36, then you of course can use this sensor for the gauge and use only the 2 pins, or you can use this one, yeah, which is for the gauge and has only 2 pins. But of course this only comes with the M12 thread, and this one is in M14, so at least you have 2 options, yeah, M12 or M14 for the E36 gauge. Yeah, so I think that's it for this video. I forgot to mention as well that I didn't buy the OEM sensors, of course, but I will, in the table which you will find in the description, I will include there the original equipment numbers from the BMW and also the sensors which I used here, because I don't know, I would say the fast-set, the top run, all of these sensors cost like €3, so they were quite cheap. So I would say even the resistance values which are measured, yeah, will be in some kind of tolerance, yeah. Okay, so check the description for more informations and see you next time.